regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Cam Edwards, your host. Glad that you're with us today. I'm just going to go ahead and call this Second Monday. Just some behind-the-scenes stuff, and it's just one of those days where what could go wrong will go wrong. I'm waiting for this microphone to just turn off, waiting for my hat to fall apart, but I think we're going to be okay, at least for the next little bit. Coming up on the program today, Jim Wallace of the Gun Owners Action League in Massachusetts is going to join us talking about a situation developing in many towns and cities across the state, including the city of Boston, Massachusetts, where people who are applying to receive their firearms ID card, which is necessary to actually exercise your right to keep arms in Massachusetts, they're being told, sorry, we're just not processing applications right now. People who are applying for their concealed carry license or their Class A license in Massachusetts being told the same thing in many jurisdictions, including Boston. So while across the country, we've had millions of Americans since the start of the year become gun owners for the first time, in Massachusetts, you've got this huge backlog of residents who would like to be able to exercise their Second Amendment rights, but can't do so, at least legally, under Massachusetts law right now because the issuing authorities are simply hitting the pause button on processing any of these applications. So we'll talk with Jim Wallace about that coming up in just a moment. Before we do, though, a note here. The Trump campaign has a special offer just for you. President Trump wants to meet you. This is going to be the first opportunity that the president has had to meet with patriots like yourself since the country started reopening. So his team will cover the flight, hotel, give you VIP access for yourself and a guest. The president will even take a picture with you. All you have to do is text ENGAGE to 88022 today for your chance to meet President Trump. Again, that's ENGAGE to 88022 to enter to win this contest and to join President Trump in the fight to keep America great for 4 more years, paid for by Donald J. Trump for President Incorporated. So again, had the opportunity to spend some time with our friend Jim Wallace from the Gun Owners Action League, talk about everything that's going on in Massachusetts and the possibility, fingers crossed here, that there may be a resolution on the horizon. Take a look and a listen. Jim Wallace, thank you, sir, for coming on the program today.
Hey, welcome back to the Second Amendment Battleground State, right?
Yeah, there's always something going on in Massachusetts, although right now it would be nice if there was actually a little bit more going on, because what's actually happening is that there's stuff that should be happening that's not at the moment. You've got jurisdictions across the state that are refusing, basically, it seems, Jim, months after this lockdown first went into effect, even as the state's talking about moving into phase 3, depending on where you live, there's a good chance that if you want to become a gun owner, that your local authority is not processing your applications right now.
Yeah, it goes back to early to mid-March when the first, lockdown started, that police stations, local licensing authorities did not want to handle license applications, especially new ones. And the new ones seem to be the biggest problem. Renewals, for the most part, have been pretty good. We worked early on with the Major Chiefs Association in Mass, Major City Chiefs Association in Mass, and they actually told their, members that for the renewals to use the Registry of Motor Vehicles photograph for your renewal license. And for the most part, people did that, and it was good. But some of them won't even do renewals. Now, there's a whole host of towns so far that won't do new applications and haven't done them since the start of the lockdown, because you need to have your fingerprints taken, photograph taken, and a lot of the chiefs require an interview. So they pretty much have shut that part of it down. And we've been working ever since to try to find a solution. And one of the solutions we provided our members, or at least a proposed solution, was under the license to carry law, you can actually apply to the state police. So we told people, try this, see if this works. And as you saw, I'm sure you saw the letter, the state police had said, no, we won't be processing licenses either.
Yeah, looking at this letter here, and I'll put up on the screen for folks to see for themselves. But in essence, I mean, it's go look elsewhere. Go to your local jurisdiction. We're not doing this. How can they do that, by the way, Jim? I mean, if it's under state law that the state police are supposed to be doing this, or this agency is supposed to be doing this. How can they all of a sudden say, nope, we're only doing this for law enforcement, retired law enforcement, and civilians who need to have their license to carry for their job with an agency?
Well, that's a very good question. And under the Deval-Patrick administration, the different law that deals with non-resident licenses used to go to the state police. And under his administration, he shifted that burden to the Firearms Record Bureau without changing the law, just did it through a memorandum of understanding between the two agencies. And we're thinking that they believe that applies to this as well. But unfortunately, they did not take the opportunity to explain to people why they weren't processing licenses anymore and why they weren't following, which made things even worse.
Yeah, and this again, it's sort of part and parcel of how the state has responded to residents wanting to exercise their Second Amendment rights over the past few decades, but specifically over the past few months since the coronavirus concerns, resulted in these closures. I mean, we saw litigation after Governor Charlie Baker had originally said gun stores can be open, and then the next day he said, actually, nope, they're closed. And it's interesting, Jim, because the federal judge in that case, Judge Woodlock, I believe is his name, basically told the state, like, okay, so yeah, you say this is just a temporary closure of these gun stores, so it's not really infringing on people's rights, but you can't say when these stores are going to be reopened. You can't say when things are going to get back to normal. So it's not just that this is a temporary deprivation of people's ability to purchase or acquire a firearm or ammunition. It's an open-ended deprivation of their ability to do so. It seems to me like that's the same logic could be applied to what these localities are doing right now.
Yeah, it was interesting because the judge flat out asked him, what does temporary mean now? Because we don't know what that means right now. Because even though you're going to open things now, we don't know what's going to happen this fall or this winter. You could go right back to where you were in March and suddenly everything is shut down and our civil rights are shut down. So, it's one of those deals that you can claim all kinds of things, but when I can still go out and get my favorite fast food or my favorite takeout coffee, you name it, I can do it right now. Why can't you process a license? And in fact, it's kind of interesting because, some of the people are saying, and I'm pretty sure it was Alan Gottlieb that said a couple of weeks ago, well, if you're refusing to process licenses, then you cannot start arresting people for exercising their civil rights because you're not doing your job. And it would be interesting to see how that would play out legally.
It would indeed. Yeah. Especially for somebody who is not legally prohibited from carrying a firearm, but has not been able or own a firearm, but has not been able to get their license. Yeah. What happens if the only offense is, well, they're carrying without a license that the local jurisdiction won't give them because they're shut down? I don't know that I would necessarily want to be the person to challenge that law in court, but it would make, I think, a fascinating legal defense. Speaking of lawsuits and challenging things in court, Jim, what is the potential or the possibility of challenging these delays and these the lack of processing of these license applications or the FID applications right now?
Well, it's kind of interesting because Google and other organizations have been called out by people for not filing a lawsuit, but the problem has been for 2 months we've been trying to find plaintiffs to file a lawsuit. And so far, up until yesterday, no one had stepped up and said, yeah, I'll be the plaintiff. Let's get this action going. So no plaintiff, no case. So we've been willing to file it for a couple of months now, but nobody's been willing up until yesterday. We finally got a couple of calls, but now it looks like, we also got contacted this morning by, the state public safety office and said, they've told us that if towns are refusing to process licenses, let us know and we will contact them and see if we can get them up and running, because I guess they've had some success doing that with just a few towns so far. But so I gave them Boston. All right, let's see what you can do with the city of Boston, because they're one of the. So we'll see how good the Office of Public Safety is with that, and we'll see what happens. If they can open things, fine. But the other thing is, even if we get them open now, I think there needs to be something in the law that basically says if you cannot or will not process licenses for whatever reason, then there has to be some form of, give back to the resident. If we can't or won't issue license or even process your license application, then the requirement has to be nullified.
I mean, that's just common sense to me. I imagine it's going to be an uphill climb with anti-gun lawmakers to get them to agree to that. But that to me seems like the fair and just thing to do. I'll be very curious to see what happens in Boston if the Department of Public Safety is able to get them to open up their application approvals again. I mean, you say that you heard from a couple of folks who might be potential plaintiffs here. You've now let DPS know what's going on in Boston. I don't know if any of those people who reached out to you yesterday are from Boston, but how long would you give the city to get their act together before, if you do have a plaintiff, before you would try to file a suit?
Well, it's going to be interesting because once these cities and towns do open up for new licensing, they've got a long backlog of applications they're going to have to deal with.
Oh, yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how far out people can get appointments, versus what they could do during, I guess, normal application processes. So, probably not going to give them long because it's their fault that they didn't do it. It could have been, I mean, even Chelsea, big city, working with that chief, he said, no, we're up and running. All we did was set up a table, little piece of plexiglass, you stick your hand through, we fingerprint you, we take photograph, whatever we need to do, we're processing. So why can't everybody else do it?
It's a great question. All right. Well, we'll be checking in with you in a few days then, Jim, and see if there's any update out of Beantown or any of the other cities across Massachusetts. And in the meantime, if there are folks who have been in this situation, they've tried to get their FID card approved or they've tried to get their license to carry approved and their local jurisdiction just simply isn't processing these. Are you still looking for more potential plaintiffs? Should they reach out to Gun Owners Action League?
Well, not just plaintiffs. Now we're also, once again, looking for more information. If your town is not processing these things, now the state wants to know. So send us the information. We will forward it to the state and we'll see what we can get done.
All right. Jim Wallace with the Gun Owners Action League. Thank you as always, sir. Look forward to talking again soon. All right. We will be following along and see what developments might shake out here over the next few days in Massachusetts. By the way, here is that letter from the Massachusetts State Police. Please be advised that we are returning your license to carry application. The Department of State Police no longer issues or renews licenses to carry unless the applicant is a member of the Department of State Police, either active or retired, or a civilian employee who has a requirement of his or her employment is required to possess a license to carry. Your application should be submitted to the licensing authority in your jurisdiction, even if, of course, the licensing authority in your jurisdiction is not issuing any licenses whatsoever. All right, before we get to today's recidivist report, our good deed of the day, our armed citizen story, just a reminder once again that the Trump campaign has a special offer just for you. President Trump wants to meet you. It's going to be the first opportunity that he has had to meet with patriots like yourself since the country started reopening. So his team going to cover the flight, hotel, give you VIP access for yourself and a guest. President Trump will even take a picture with you as well. That's pretty cool. All you have to do is text ENGAGE to 88022 for your chance to meet President Trump. Again, that's ENGAGE to 88022 to enter to win this contest today and to join President Trump in the fight to keep America great for 4 more years. Paid for by Donald J. Trump for President Incorporated. All right, let's get to today's armed citizen story and more. We'll actually start with our recidivist report story out of Mountain Home, Arkansas, where a man recently in court for the second time in less than a year on charges of shooting someone. That would be Christopher Allen Whitman right there on your screen. 7 months ago in November, Whitman pleaded guilty to felony aggravated assault for firing shots at somebody. He says, well, I fired at the ground, but he ended up taking this guilty plea to a felony charge of aggravated assault, which makes him a prohibited person. And then he was sentenced to 4 years probation. Yeah. And less than 7 months later, he's now been arrested, charged once again, this time for a case on June the 2nd when allegedly Whitman shot a man after not quite abducting him, told the victim, hey, I want to meet you. I want to talk to you. They start driving around. Whitman confronts the guy, says, hey, you know what? I hear that you've been giving this woman a hard time. Victim says, I haven't been. Whitman eventually orders the guy out of the car and then shoots him in the leg before driving off. Yeah, so now Whitman's facing several charges, including felon in possession of a firearm as well as aggravated assault charges. Prosecutors are also moving to revoke the probation that they gave him just 7 months ago. But perhaps, just perhaps, if Mr. Whitman had been sentenced to, I don't know, any time behind bars whatsoever, that maybe this incident wouldn't have happened at all. Today's armed citizen story, Long Beach, California, where 2 men were killed in a home invasion, according to authorities. Happened just after midnight on Tuesday. 2 men, according to police, barged into this home in Long Beach, began assaulting the residents inside. At least one of the residents was known to at least one of the suspects. We also know that one resident in the home grabbed a gun, fired shots. One of the intruders was dead there at the residence when police arrived. The second suspect found with multiple gunshot wounds a couple of blocks away after he had fled the home. He, too, pronounced dead on the scene. Police still investigating this case, but right now it looks like a clear-cut case of self-defense. Authorities say that the homeowners or the residents inside that home cooperating with authorities, and right now it doesn't look like they did anything to instigate this violence. They just protected themselves from violence. Finally, today, our good deed of the day. I have a little bit of a problem with the headline and the thrust of the writing up of this story from some media outlets. I absolutely do not have a problem with the heroic deed performed, but this is from the New York Daily News, and you see the headline there. White police officers saved from burning car by black man who hasn't, quote, had the best past with law enforcement. Dalen McLee is this gentleman's name in Pennsylvania. As the New York Daily News writes, he could not be blamed for being leery of police, but the Pennsylvania man wasted no time pulling a cop out of a burning car and saving his life on Sunday morning. Now, we'll get to what has happened with Mr. McLee in the past, but I got to say, there's something about the framing of this story that just bothers me. So, Mr. McLee, as I said, we'll get to in just a second, has had some issues with police and rightfully might be upset with law enforcement in general. But that doesn't mean that Mr. McLee had any issue with this officer who he had never met before, who was trapped inside this burning vehicle, and who Mr. McLee saved. He said, I don't know what came across me, but I ripped the door open. I just pulled him to safety across the street. Happened in Uniontown, Pennsylvania, about 45 minutes south of Pittsburgh. Officer Jay Hanley was involved in this 2-car crash. He suffered a severe leg injury, and he was stuck inside that burning car until Mr. McLee reached in and grabbed him. Uniontown Police Lieutenant Thomas Kolachek told WTAE in Pittsburgh that there were no words to describe his department's appreciation for McLee's bravery. Said Dalen actually said, I'm not going to let him die. And according to CBS News, McLee told them, quote, I haven't had the best pass with law enforcement, just to know that there's still good people out there. And added that Hanley was his, quote, brother through Christ. So what has happened to Mr. McLee is, in my opinion, an injustice. Back in 2016, McLee ended up getting involved in a fight in Pennsylvania. This was outside of I think like a community center or a American Legion Hall in Dunbar, PA. And cops claimed that McLee had pointed a gun at them, but the surveillance video actually showed that the 31-year-old took a gun away from somebody else who was involved in that fight, then threw it to safety so that he couldn't get to it, trying to defuse the situation. McLee ended up spending a year in jail awaiting trial for what he called falsified charges in a civil suit filed in 2018. And it looks like, again, the charges were ultimately dropped. He also said that he's had another run-in, I guess, earlier this year. He said plainclothes cops chased him off of a porch gathering, kicked him in the face before charging him for resisting arrest. He said he did not know that the pursuers were police officers, plainclothes and all, plans to fight the charges. So, again, I completely understand that Mr. McLee might have issues with those officers. But it almost sounds like, with the headline from the New York Daily News, that they were kind of, well, if Daley McLee had just walked away, nobody could blame him. And I don't buy that. I'm glad to hear Mr. McLee kind of refute this framing in his conversations with media outlets, talking again about, I might have had problems with police, but this officer is my brother in Christ. Man, that's a phrase you'll never actually hear from a reporter or an editor or anybody else in the mainstream media these days, talking about turning the other cheek, loving thy neighbor, things of that nature. No, they are too busy wanting us to tear each other's throats out instead of loving one another. That is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. Actually, I should say, I forgot to say, in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. Mr. McLee, we thank you very much for your very good deed. That is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program today. Hey, if you are a VIP Gold member, you can catch the replay of a live chat between myself and Hot Air's Ed Morrissey, taking place Wednesday afternoon. You can subscribe, become a VIP Gold member, get exclusive analysis, commentary, access to those live chats and more at townhall.com or at bearingarms.com as well. We'll be back tomorrow with more of the latest Second Amendment news and information, talking with our friend Cibola County, New Mexico Sheriff Tony Mace about New Mexico's governor, who's on the short list for vice president or Joe Biden's vice presidential list. So stay tuned for that. And until then, be safe, be well, be free. We'll see you soon with another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company.